Hey, peace, world. This is Kimon Freeman, Angry Black Man Therapy, representing We Act Radio, and also DC Delegate Candidate for Congress in Washington, D.C. I'm here at Legacy Studios, joined by some exceptional young ladies. Honored to be here in communication with them. We have Ms. Anna Rodriguez, ANC candidate, ANC
5E01.
There we go, what she said. And also our incumbent, Miss Eboni-Rose Thompson, Ward 7, State Board of Education, sponsored by, endorsed by the Washington Teachers Union, and rest in peace to the former President, Liz Davis. So we want to introduce these ladies to the public. We want to have an open dialogue and concern so that local elected officials have a platform to come in and speak to the community so that they know they have choices out here, and informed choices, because we are here to basically put some paint where they ain't and tell the truth and shame the devil. And these ladies are worthy of my respect, and I hope they would be worthy of your vote. All right. So having that, we're going to open this up with Miss Anna Rodriguez. Who are you? Introduce yourself to the world and let them know why you cared to run and do something out here.
Hello, everyone. My name is, again, Anna Rodriguez, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able to advocate for the things that I feel that we need today in D.C. I've been in D.C. over 30 plus years, 15 years of those 30 years in the neighborhood that we call Hanover and Bates area, which is the four main corridors. You got New York, New Jersey, North Cap, and Florida Avenue. And as a lot of people know, that area has a lot of historical implements in the neighborhood, like the famous New York Avenue playground, which used to be called the White and Colored Playground. And so just to get to the point of where I'm at, the reason why I am running to be the ANC commissioner is because at a time I had a friend by the name of Dr. Bertha Holliday. She was the commissioner for a long time, and she was fighting for the preservation of the history of the neighborhood. She was currently had the area of Bloomingdale. And as you know, with the red zoning and the red lining, the neighborhoods changed. They had clauses from Eckington to Bloomingdale. And so what she wanted to do was lock down the Black history that was in the neighborhood. And she passed away, rest in peace, Dr. Holliday. And when she passed away, a lot of the initiatives and things that she was writing for resolutions were being erased. And it struck a chord in my heart. And I said, yeah, I'm not a native Washingtonian, but I know the importance of preserving our history and preserving the people that have been here. I am for stop changing the names, stop moving things according to what we might think this neighborhood needs at this time, and really collaborating with the community that's been there. I am one of those people that in order for us to move forward, we must go back and visit the ones. I have a neighborhood that I call the Tale of Two Cities. If you go to the left of our neighborhood, which is 5E02, all the way across, all the way up until Bloomingdale, you have a lot of access. You have a lot of homeowners. But when you go to the right side of my neighborhood, in which the area I live in, predominantly the renters are renters and not homeowners, because the reality is we cannot afford the homes that are now in my neighborhood. And so that's why I'm running, because I want to build a community of people that when we walk outside, we can all say hi to each other. It's gotten to the point where neighbors don't know neighbors, and it's a lot of no building community. And so I'm just tired. I'm just tired of going out, especially when safety is a huge thing. But you say safety is a huge thing at the same time, but then the thing is, have you talked to who lives next to you? Have you asked them what their concerns are? And not everyone's computer savvy, so not everyone's gonna do emails or go on virtual meetings. Have you knocked on someone's door? And so that's where I'm at with this candidacy. I wanna be able to be a person that represents the whole neighborhood, not just me, not just where I'm at in my life, but where everyone is. And I just wanna make sure that the residents that have been there for 70 to 40 plus years are still recognized and their voice still matters. And that's why I'm running to be the ANC commissioner of 5E01.
And you have advocate for all as your theme for your candidacy, and that's apropos. I think a lot of people are not aware of the actual roles of advisory neighborhood commissioners. And so we're going to get into more of that in just a moment. Now we spotlight our incumbent here, Ward 7 State Board of Election, State Board of Education, excuse me, Miss Eboni-Rose. Please introduce yourself and let these folks know why you run the first time and why you're running again. I also want to acknowledge that she's also was a former candidate for Ward 7 Councilwoman and won a very competitive race, was in the top 3 in the finals out of a Wu-Tang clan of people who was running and could possibly have benefited from ranked choice voting and pulled out a win had we had a revolutionary voting method in place. So, but the floor is yours, Ms. Eboni-Rose.
Did I say that to you, that it was the Wu-Tang Clan?
I know. I definitely describe it as that. I think it was like 9 people was running.
It was at least 10 at one point. Yeah, so good to meet everyone, and I really appreciate just being able to talk about like the why. I think why is important. This is the end of my first term as the Ward 7 representative to the state board. And folks know I also serve as the president of the board, but I make sure that people know that I've always represented Ward 7 first. It is my home. And when I say my home, I do mean like my home in every sense of the word. I currently live in the neighborhood that I grew up in. My neighborhood school when I was a kid, went to pre-K through 5th grade, is my neighborhood school now. I also had the same first, third, and PE teacher as my mom, who is now a
special lady.
My mom is awesome, who is now a retired teacher. But like when you ask me like why I ran the first time, why I'm running again, I actually think my mom is a really good example of how I see education in the city. Not because she's a teacher, folks know that, but what they don't know is that before she was a teacher, she was actually an electrician. That was my mom's first career. She was she was a union electrician. She wired a lot of the hotels downtown. It's something she's really proud of. It's probably something that my stepdad also bothers him a little bit because, you know, she does stuff on her own. She's very independent. And she made the choice to go back to college and UDC grad and become a teacher. Not because that was a lesser pathway for her. Honestly, when she first started teaching and, you know, student loans and all the things, she was like, I made less money than I ever have as a teacher. And that was a different time. And I remember my mom being in college. Like I was 7, I think, when she started college. I was at every single one of her graduations, bachelor's, 2 masters. And I tell people that because for me, being able to make it back to this city is really the struggle for Washingtonians, whatever pathway that takes. I think that our job as people who are invested in education is to prepare kids for the now, to prepare kids for the future, and that future changes. And so when I tell people about my mom's trajectory, I tell them about the 2 paths that she took, not because one of those was a lesser path, but because in both of those paths, when she graduated from Eastern Class of 80, she was prepared to do anything she wanted to do in the world. And we were talking before, I learned that my sister is actually Anna's neighbor, not too far from Dunbar. She's on the Ward 2 side. So yeah, there is definitely a tale of 2 cities. But when I think about like my own family and my sisters, we all had vastly different careers. But we're people who like literally have been able to stay. And the same people who I graduated from elementary, middle, and high school with, that's not the experience they're having in this city. They're not able to say, Angel is a homeowner because she is that person who's going to layer every policy on top of another. She did HPAP, she did HPAP-E, she did inclusionary zoning, all the things. And so she was able to get a house in that neighborhood. But I know that not only is she the exception to what is our reality, I know that that's a constant struggle for people who look like me and who are from here. And so when it comes to the State Board of Education, our job is really to think about the quality of what kids learn.
Quality of what they learn.
It's the quality of what they learn. We do high school graduation requirements. We do academic standards. We do things around teacher licensure. Folks will say, oh, the State Board doesn't have any power. And there are limitations to our power. We are not a school board. That was one of the first elected positions in D.C. Folks should absolutely, like you said, know their history, preserve the history. We don't currently have a school board. All those powers rest with the mayor. I call that the budget, the buildings, the buses, right? But the quality of what kids learn, how we are preparing our young people, that is the most powerful thing ever. And we have to really own our responsibility as far as preparation. And so that job is still not done. That's why I'm committed to staying on the board. It's not like if I would have won council, I would have been like, oh, psych, education no more. That's not a thing. We still have work to do. And we're doing some really good work on the board that's really building on that. I'm happy to talk about those things. But that is like the why. The why doesn't change. Sometimes where you are in the work changes, but the why doesn't change.
So we no longer have a chancellor structure in Washington, D.C. for public education?
We do. So that's part of our mayoral control system. I think folks, I think there's two parts. There's the local part and there's the state part. We, as a state board of education, we work with OSSI. Again, that's a lot of the stuff that kids learn. But then there's like the mayor. The mayor is like kind of has everything. She has mayor, she has the state stuff, she has the local stuff, and then the chancellor is essentially a different way of saying superintendent that does not require someone to have a PhD. But that person reports to the mayor. That person does not report to a school board. And that's what most people are familiar with. They are familiar with saying, oh, this person's elected to represent me on the school board, and I can go to them and say, hey, this is what's happening in my kid's classroom. Hey, this is what's happening, the kids' bus is late. We get a lot of that from OSSI. Hey, this is what the budget looks like. And all of that stuff in reality does not rest with your elected representation for education in D.C., which is a conversation that I think we should have more, because people, in order to actually like navigate your life, you need to know who you're talking to.
Right. Well, the inaugural chancellor, Michelle Rhee, the original appointment in that position, did not go over too well. It definitely sank the Fenty administration ship, and I think that's probably why they try to get away from that. But you mentioned the tale of two cities, so I want to put this as an open question to both of you. In the terms of tales of two cities, D.C. has the average white family has 81 times the wealth of the average black family. There's over a 20-year life expectancy disparity depending on your zip code. The list goes on. So when we say a tales of two cities, what is it you think the city is getting right, and what is it you think the city is getting wrong that you want to address in your capacity in the position that you are running for? I'll give it to you, Ms. Anna.
I'll go with what's going right. I believe that in D.C. we do have platforms where we're able to advocate. You go to council, SBOE. So we have different ways where we can go into our neighborhoods. We have civic associations. As far as ANC, that's what I'm talking about, where we can advocate. So there is a lot of opportunity for us to be able to use our voices. But where they don't get it right is the communication part. Like, how do you meet the people that communicate differently? Not everyone communicates the same. Whether it's a language barrier, I'm bilingual, but language barrier is just one part of it. But as far as the understanding of what's going on, so if I live in this house and I'm not understanding why my taxes are going up, what is the role of the neighborhood when they're, gentrifying the neighborhood? When they're bringing in new businesses. But I've lived there and now my taxes went up and I truly cannot afford because now I'm on a fixed income. So it's more of where I feel they're not communicating is where they're not bringing in resources for the people that have been in the community for a long time to understand what is going on with their neighborhood. That's where the ANC is supposed to play a big part, because the ANC is the voice of the community. And that allows me to be able to speak in those testifying and with our council. So our current council member right now is Zachary Parker, who used to be on SBOE.
That's my council member, Ward 5, Zachary
Ward 5.
Parker.
So I think that's where the city is getting it wrong. And that's like where I'm at. It's like communication. It's like how do we beat this barrier without assuming that we have to do it one way? There's not a one way.
Well, I think that we was mentioning this off camera, was that it's over 200 advisory neighborhood commissioners in the city. But I don't think there's enough synergy where they, as a governing body, as a collective, exchange notes and confer with each other and dialogue. I think that we're a bunch of I don't like the word, but it's just a cliche of Indians instead of being a unit, because people will go and pick them off individually. Like, is there even agreement of what a community benefit package should look like amongst all of the ANCs? Because what it may be acceptable here may not be acceptable there, and what have you. And I think this is how we're all getting robbed, because again, the cliche of being an Indian is that the American government broke every treaty ever made with the Indians, and when they did it individually. You know, they didn't speak to the nation. You know. And so I hope that you'll be open to driving that point home, creating more of a collective within the ANC. I just want to put that out there in terms of addressing the Tales of Two Cities. So the Tales of Two Cities for you, what we getting right, what we getting wrong, and what do you want to do in your capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I was an ANC. I served.
That's how it usually starts.
6 years. Well, we can talk about how it started. That's a different thing for a different day. I mean, honestly,
how's it starting? How's it going?
Yeah. Yes, that. Like I ran for ANC actually first because nobody else was running. And my grandparents were ANCs. My granddad was one of the first ANCs. My grandma was an ANC, and my aunt was an ANC. And so the idea that nobody was representing us wasn't tolerable. For me, that just wasn't, not that I knew I was going to be the best ANC. I was like 21 at the time. So I've learned a lot since then. But I do think what you said about like the collective is really important, and the amount of support, education, and collaboration that goes with elected office. Because a lot of times when you run for office, there's like the thing that's happening now. And then there's like the everything else. And so I would say that as an ANC commissioner, it really was like a good on-the-job training for just navigating government to get stuff done for your community, period, like across the board. And nobody taught me that, which is really important, whether it's like community benefit stuff, whether it's like ANCs can do so much. And I don't know if we really are doing a great job of empowering and educating ANCs to be all that they can be. And then just like the different levers there are to pull, like civic associations. Everybody, like I'm very team do your job. So I'll just throw that out there.
I'm very team
do your job. And if you know what your job is, so like if you're an ANC, like things folks don't talk about, you brought up community benefits agreements. And this is where the Tale of Two Cities gets in. It's like there are folks who have so many resources. And I use resources intentionally, but also in a diverse way. There are people who have resources as far as just like their flexibility and time. There are people who have resources because they are professionally trained lawyers, accountants, exposed to different networks and career paths. There are folks who literally have their own disposable income. There are folks who are very connected to the city and developers and contractors, and all that matters. And when we talk about certain parts of the city, parts of the city like where I live, parts of the city like where you live, it becomes a tale of two cities, not because it's all the same system, but people's ability to navigate that system is very different. And so one of the things I learned, and I remember maybe my first term as an ANC, they were talking about civic associations and ANCs, and even just like corner stores and liquor licenses. People don't realize that's something that ANCs deal with. And they were like, well, an ANC can't sue the city because they're part of the city. Like you're part, I don't think folks realize you are part of the government once you are elected. And there's certain stuff you do at that point in the assembly line as part of the government. Now, what your power is as an ANC, though, is to be like, all right, look, we're going to pass this thing. You have to respond to me. And then if you have a functioning civic association, especially one that has very professional people on it, those people can actually use the information you got to sue the city and enforce things like community benefits agreements, enforce things like covenants people put in place with, like, let's say you're like, all right, look, y'all can't have people loitering outside after this time, or you're not going to have blah, like, right. So some neighborhoods have things like that, some don't. And so that contributes to our Tale of Two Cities. That stuff has nothing to do with the State Board of Education, but I think it's actually really important for citizens to know, because we all are living our lives here and trying to navigate and figure it out. When it comes to Tale of Two Cities, SBOE, what can Eboni-Rose do as in my elected capacity, hopefully again, as the state board representative? When I talked about folks being able to make it back in DC, one of the things that I share with folks is that DC has both one of the highest numbers of advanced degrees per capita. We're talking like PhDs, and some of the lowest still high school graduation rates in the country. And that can only possibly be true if those are not the same people, because they are not the same people.
And not to mention a literacy crisis. We have a literacy rate that's higher than the national average.
Yes, so in Ward 7, we actually have the highest adult illiteracy rate in the city.
If the citywide average is higher than the national average, then of course the poorest section of town is going to be higher than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but people think, so there's only really two places that we are, quote unquote, behind Ward 8. Because it's really tricky.
There's only two?
Two. That because what ends up happening is really
Ward 8
hard
and Ward 7 a race to the bottom?
advocate for being second poorest. It's just not as sexy. That's just the truth. And so what ends up happening, and like Ward 7 is actually a philanthropic desert. So like there are specific funders who give, and they'll say, we're giving east of the river. It doesn't matter if it's the JP Morgan and Chase of the world or the Horn Brothers. When they say east of the river, they really mean Ward 8. Because those are the zip codes that are at the absolute bottom. That doesn't mean that there is a need in Ward 7. But literally, folks do not see Ward 7 in the same way, even though we have whole communities with the same need, because they're like, oh, you have the Hillcrest and you have the Penn Branch and we're not all collectively on fire. And so it is really hard to get resources for folks who are the second poorest. When we say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? There are a lot of things in place if your life is on fire. There's a lot of stuff in place, and there are a lot of resources you can navigate if you have a lot of resource already. The folks that are anywhere in the middle, like the families that are anywhere in the middle, that's where the struggle is. It doesn't matter if we're talking about navigating things like where am I going to send my kid to school, or what resources there are for out of school time, or feeding them, or whatever it is. Like our middle in DC is feeling really, really crunched right now, and that was not always true. That was not true. Like having a black group of people that could just be working and middle class is important to us having a diverse city. When I graduated and went to Penn, one of the things I did not love about Philly is stuff was getting really nice and then really not, and I couldn't understand it because I grew up here in DC. And so I really appreciate the work that folks like Marion Berry did to put pathways in place so we can actually have a middle class, not the narrative we have now, but like actually people being able to say, you know what, I'm just trying to live a quiet life, run a business, own a home. Like that's what folks are struggling with if they're talking about what Anna's talking about, saying like, I literally can't afford my taxes if they go up.
I think that's where working class people are duped into having animosity for poor people who may be able to get city services because it's a safety net for some safety nets for them, but they make too much to qualify for the same type of assistance. So they're getting squeezed on all sides. But that should not be directed at those least of us. It should be directed at where the source is coming from. And to your point about the taxes going up and not being able to afford it, we're talking about property taxes, right? So one of the largest black developers in the country, Don Peebles, I was introduced to that name by Nipsey Hussle, studying him. But Don Peebles started here in D.C. on Martin Luther King Avenue in Anacostia in Ward 8 with his first building, but he was a tax adjuster. They would tax appeal, because when you get your assessment, the big boys appeal it, and they have the same rate of winningness that the government has in conviction rates in the federal court, right? But working class people don't have the resources to appeal it. Working class people just pay the bill, and they continue to get squeezed and just get crunched. Just want to put that out there. So I want to put a question to you both. Malcolm X said that when you live in a poor neighborhood, you get a poor education. And when you get a poor education, you get a poor paying job, which enables you to live in a poor neighborhood. It's a very vicious cycle. In our effort to disrupt that, do you think that we could separate the level of education, the level of resources allocated for someone in that area based on the property taxes and have equitable funding for all our schools? Is that too radical? I put it to you guys on what do you think needs to be done to achieve equity in education?
Well, see, here's the interesting thing about that. In D.C., this is all one tax base. So Anna, me, you, the people in Ward 3, the people in Ward 2, we are one jurisdiction. It's not separate school districts, not separate. So we do actually have one of the highest per capita expenditures in our schools, whether they're in poor neighborhoods or whether they're in rich neighborhoods. Where it gets funky with us is a couple different places. One,
here we go,
is enrollment. And so like how big a school is. One of the things that I feel like is a gap in our current system is nobody is like responsible for real for looking across and saying like, what do we guarantee to every kid no matter what? So when I grew up in DC as a kid, I was on the tail end of parochial schools. Like a lot of people who are my age who are able to still stay in the city, they went to a parochial school. And the beginning, I went to one of the first charters in the city. So folks were still exercising choice, but we had a lot more
Charter's
neighborhood.
good, charter's bad, put a pin in that, but continue.
Yeah, we can talk about that. But we had a lot more neighborhood schools, and our neighborhood schools were larger. What that means is, so like in my graduating class, I had 21 people. I never took physics. I'm an Ivy League grad. I never took physics. I can tell you some other stuff I never took. I might have been a rocket scientist had somebody taught me physics in high school, but they didn't offer it. Versus like a Wilson, which is huge. They can offer everything from physics to archery to
Jackson Reed.
Jackson Reed now. My native is showing, right? Like they can offer 12 different languages, all these different things. So we don't talk about the fact that now we have so many schools and some schools are so small that you can't have as many robust offerings. When my mom went to Eastern, I told y'all she was Eastern class of 80, Eastern had like 1,000 kids. A lot of our high schools are hovering around, like we have a high school that maybe has 300 kids, right? In my ward, I have 10 high schools. That's a real thing. So we don't talk about that. We're also not talking about how much money comes into the city that's not in our funding formula.
So you said that the funding is attached to the number in
because
enrollment?
it's per student.
Okay. So I know I said put a pin in, but I have to make this point before it gets lost in the ether, is that there are charter schools who get funded because of their enrollment at the beginning of the year, and whatever the deadline cutoff time. October.
It's early October every year.
They can cut kids out of the program, strip them from the enrollment rather, and they get the same funding that they had at the beginning of the year with the less kids, and most of them are problem children or with some deficiency. They don't live up to their expectations, and they get dumped into public schools. Just want to throw that out there. That's an ongoing issue. Didn't want to steal your thunder.
I mean, we call it churn. And
call
so
it churn.
Churn, CHU,
Churn.
like you churn butter.
Oh,
Like turnover.
that's the
right?
industry term.
That's what they call
That's
it.
what
They
they
call
say
it
down
churn.
south, the churn.
Okay.
But
Children.
there are things that we can do as
Fly
a
in the
city
buttermilk.
to address the money part of it. It's not like one of the things we could do is we could say that we would count quarterly. Because we actually do pay charters on quarterly installments, right? And therefore you could adjust for schools that do see huge enrollment influxes. There are things we can do. So I just want to acknowledge that because I don't believe any system is neutral. And I want people to know what levers they can pull in our system to make them better. Like some things, you know, it is what it is, but I just want to throw that out there as a solution. Okay. And it is something that the council has entertained and can entertain again.
Okay.
So enrollment is part of it. The other part of it too that I was going to say is it's about how much money is also coming in outside of the funding formula. So people talk about things like, and I know Anna, you've heard this, and because you're a very involved parent, PTAs who are like paying for a teacher or a librarian, or who are paying for people to be able to have extracurriculars. Those are in schools where folks are like literally not just paying $300 in PTA dues, but they're having whole fundraisers. We're talking some PTA budgets are six figures. We got some that are higher than that. And so they are subsidizing their children's education on top of the funding formula. And then there's outside philanthropy, which in some cases our charters are able to take advantage of. In some cases, some of that money is funded through DCPS. What ends up happening, though, is, again, that's not necessarily equity. That's not money we are collectively guiding as a city to say is going to a place of most need. And my concern is, as someone who grew up in D.C. in the 90s, when stuff was not so, we didn't have so much money, what happens as stuff goes from boom to bust? Because we're sitting on a lot of money right now, and we're a really rich city, and we're still not serving everyone. So as things get tighter, we're really going to have to fight and make some hard decisions about our priorities and how we invest in education and kids, to answer your question.
Well, one of my favorite words is equity. So, Anna, how do you feel in contributing to the quest for equity in education in this city?
Oh, that's a huge thing. I sat on the DC school boundary study. I was representative of Ward 5. And that right there for a whole year was the reality of what we do every 10 years in DC. This was the second time they've done it. And my eyes were open. That's really the tale of two cities with education. And so I belong to a group, citywide member for PAVE, Parents Amplifying Voices for Education. And to get to the nuance of what I'm trying to say, when you say equity, we're fighting right now for specialized programming, which a lot of people like, oh, there's a lot of specialized programming, but it's not the same across east of the river versus west of the river. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the boundary study, the way it was, you had communities that had resources where they can afford to get an attorney to come to fight for recommendations to make sure that their neighborhoods were not split. And one of the areas where there was a big fight was Ward 6, which is Ward 6 is very well known for huge PTOs, and they do a lot in Ward 6. Let's just say this, if you really want to learn how certain schools get access, go to Ward 6 and look at how these parents function. I am actually the McKinley Tech PTO president. And we're just functioning with 35,000 starting because our school didn't really have a functioning PTO, and so we're trying to get this up and going. But getting back to the boundary study, because McKinley Tech is an educational campus, we have McKinley Middle, which is a Title I school. And so those kids do not feed into McKinley Tech because McKinley Tech is an application school. So what ends up happening, Dunbar would be the feeder school for these kids. But if you know about McKinley Middle, the boundary from McKinley Middle enters Ward 7, the end of Ward 5, like Trinidad and everything. But with Ward 6, so when you're looking at where they're pulling from, as far as bringing the kids, whether they're coming, so you think because the kids are coming from east of the river to west of the river, there's a benefit of them coming up. But the disparity of the parent participation, where the parent funneling money into the school, is where it comes separate. Just from McKinley Middle, less than a mile away, we have Inspired Teaching Demonstration, which was where my daughter went to. You had the IFA, they don't call themselves the PTO, where they raised like $250,000 in one night. But our PTO at McKinley Tech is $35,000. That's not knocking, so we have to be creative with fundraising. But if you go to Ward 6, when we did the boundary study, you had people fighting because they didn't want to intermix with minor and Maury. So it was like the thing where they were fighting, like, we don't want our neighborhood. And the way they put it is, we don't want our neighborhood separated. But then what happens to the kids that are in certain parts of Ward 6 or Ward 7 that would have been their boundary school? They would have had the access for specialized and out of school time and more access for different things that are not offered at all schools. Because if you look at the reality, most people travel to school because they're trying to get access for dual language or possibly STEM or STEAM or anything they could think of that their kids want to benefit from. But the disparity is in equity is that now I have to travel outside of my neighborhood to get these resources. So I feel like that's where the disparity is.
I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah,
Too
so
many people.
I'm traveling every day 45 minutes. And so, I just went to a forum called School Talk for SMT. And so, we have huge truancy issues. And we don't have one answer for why kids are truant. But in this meeting, we were able to find out that kids do go to children. So they're seeing them going to the doctors and having physicals up to date, but they don't see them in the school. So that's like a huge disparity when you have transportation. So like right there where I live at. So like, let me go back to my neighborhood. Dunbar is literally 2 blocks from my house. They moved the bus stop from, what is that, N Street and North Cap, like between P and N was the bus stop. Mundo Verde uses that because they're huge on community, using the community transportation to get around the around the neighborhood or around the city. And they moved the bus stop all the way down to Bates. So now you have the kids leaving from Dunbar when safety is a huge issue, coming through the neighborhood now, which is not welcoming to them because when they see kids, they see issue. So when you see Dunbar kids coming out, now they have to walk down First Street, go down Bates to get, when before all they had to do was walk across to get to the bus stop. Back then they used to have a bus stop literally right when you would come out of Dunbar, right on the corner where the playground ended.
It's on North Cap.
It's no longer there. So they moved these bus stops, and half of the kids, what is it, over 85% of the kids, I don't want to give estimate, kids are coming from east of the river, they come to Dunbar.
Yeah.
That's all right. Okay. Well, because they're trying to go where
They're trying to go where
resources are.
Where resources are.
I mean, I think people are using, it's my opinion, but anecdotally, I feel like people are using 3 things to try to figure out if it's a good school or not. One is like, how far west can I get? Because west implies socioeconomic status changes. Like if you think about the difference between Ward 3 versus like Ward 8, why folks go to Jackson Reed or Deal as opposed to Woodson or Kelly Miller or, Ballou, right? So how far west can I go? Because in real life, Jackson Reed is just a comprehensive high school. It's just our biggest one, and it's in our whitest, wealthiest ward. 2, they look to see if there's an application, which is essentially some way to say, my kids aren't going to be with those kids. And folks don't say it like that. But that's what it comes down to, is they're like, oh, okay, these are all kids that are like coming from an involved family, are on a certain track, like there's going to be,
Wow.
right? Like that's, people don't say it that not polite, but that's what it comes down to. Or 3, is there some type of specialty program? Because we think a specialty program is extra investment. So that's going to be things like, is it Montessori? Is it dual language? Because we don't actually have a shared definition for quality and what we guarantee all kids. And what Anna's talking about is important because when we look east of the river, we don't have really application schools. We have 1 application high school, but we don't really have 2. We don't really have application schools. We don't have as many like dual language, Montessori, the programs that people recognize as investments. So people leave. They're trying to get out of what they feel is inferior education. And so everybody's going. And what Anna's talking about as far as safety is actually really important because like we were having a conversation during the primary race, which really troubled me because folks were like, we had an increase in truancy, which most places had, quite frankly, during and after the pandemic. But we also had an increase in things like carjackings and things with young people. And I feel like people were equating every kid that is not in school is a kiddie criminal. Now, that's not to say there aren't some kiddie criminals, because I know some kiddie criminals, and we've had kiddie criminals since I was a kid and before. That's not my point. I'm not to say that no kid has done anything wrong. My point being, what folks did not realize.
Or politicians.
Sorry?
So I'm got
We got some we got some criminal politicians too. They come in all kinds. I'm saying, I know no profession doesn't have a perfect person, right? Like that's the thing. My point being that what we actually, when we surveyed kids, looked at the data, looked at the reasons they weren't going to school, overwhelmingly, it was because they did not feel safe. They didn't feel safe getting to and from school.
And I think that commute, public transportation
Is a
across
big part
town,
of it, especially if you know DC. Like, you know that DC people have neighborhood beefs. You think about even simple stuff like it's fall, it's darker now. Think about in December when you're trying to come home and it's already dark, right? And what we feel like as adult people, why do we think kids are immune from feeling like, oh, this isn't that great? And like a lot of kids are literally have like hour-long commutes all the way across the city. They're getting on the metro too. They're getting on the bus too. Like that's what's happening. In addition to, I don't think we talk enough about what happens with young ladies and how they feel sexualized as they're like, because when you ask folks, like an Office of the Student Advocate inside the State Board's office, they've done the surveys. When you ask kids, do they feel safe? They'll be like, I kind of feel okay. When you drill down, they start telling you all these experiences that when you think about it, you're like, well, dang, if that was happening to my son or my daughter or my little brother or my little sister, little cousin, you'd be like, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. And especially the young ladies are saying when they're going to and from school, like, it's harassment, it's assault, it's all these things that are constant.
I definitely
and
see
we
it
are
as a danger to
responsible
young
for
ladies.
that. We are responsible.
Because we were grown men, it ain't just the kids.
Correct.
They're
not on
cat
school
calling
buses.
At the little girl.
Yeah, they're not on school buses. Like I remember, I used to go to what is now Ron Brown. They changed it from Roper to Ron Brown. I remember being in the 6th grade just trying to get from Fort DuPont to Deanwood and what it was like getting on the bus, going to school, and the men. Who, and I'm not even, like, it's people now, I will knock on doors and folks will go, are you old enough to have this job? And I'm like, I'm closer to 40 than I am to 30. So you cannot tell me as a kid, I didn't look like a whole kid. Do you know what I mean? And so I think sometimes I think empathy is really important for people in leadership positions to have, because you're not going to have every experience, but being able to say, well, wait a minute, let me actually at least try to put myself in your shoes and what you're experiencing when I'm making decisions about where resources go, what policies we have. That's how you actually start to get to equity. If not, then you're just making decisions for folks based on what you want. And you're probably going to be more privileged if you can be a candidate and win a race and have a seat and a title.
Seat and a title. And those ladies are after the title. And it's been a joy hearing from you, and I hope that everyone in the sound of our voices has benefited from this qualitative conversation. They can see your sincerity, your passion, your drive, and your goals in trying to alleviate some of the inequities that we find in the city of 2 different cities. So I want to give y'all an opportunity to share your contact information. How can people support your campaign? What needs to happen? What does that support look like for you? And we'll start off with Anna Rodriguez, who is our Advisory Neighborhood Commission candidate for 5E01. I got it right.
So for me, I am not taking no donations because this is for ANC. Everything that I'm doing with as far as my postcards and all that, I am paying myself, and I chose to do that because if y'all know, ANC is not a paid position. It's a position that you're pretty much volunteering, but because I love my community, I'm going to give my time, and that's where I'm paying it forward back into the community where I live at. My email address is doyoukare2024@gmail.com. I do have a Facebook page. It's at Anna Rodriguez for ANC 5E01. If you see this broadcast, share it with the people in the community and where I live, 5E01. But just share the importance that right there where I live at, Ward 5 has now gotten rid of Safe Passage. And so I'm advocating because Safe Passage is gone in Ward 5 and we need it. So please, whether I'm in position or not, it's just where my heart is. And I want my community to grow. But I really want my Black and brown people to be able to unite and move forward as other communities have moved and progressed faster than us.
And I don't think it's need to apologize or even put a disclaimer out there, because if we truly are for all, then we are part of the all, and that it should be a tide that raises all of us. And I think that we sometimes are led to believe that we can't have a black agenda or a brown agenda because the dominant society doesn't find that approvable. I think those days are far gone, especially when the people who look like us are saying it. You know, because what are you saying? That, you know, are we either all in this together or we're not? And if the greatest need is there, then the greater resources should be allocated there. And quite frankly, there's a lot of government policies that have created some of these inequities, and therefore it's going to take some new policies, some radical policies, to undo the damage that has been done. I just want to put that out there. But Ms. Eboni, how can people support your campaign and your contact information for them to do so?
So I am taking donations because wards are huge.
Tell it.
No, I mean, in fact, I would encourage you to take donations too, but we can talk about that because I think sometimes, especially as Black women, we are expected to serve selflessly, and I think sometimes we confuse selflessly with no support. And so it is okay for people to help and support you to get your message out there, and that costs money. And I want you to win. So I have a couple ways people can reach me. You can go to my website, ebonirose47.com. That is EBONIROSEFOR7.com. You can donate there. You can sign up to volunteer there. You can get on my email list there, so you can stay up to date. Most importantly, though, folks are voting now. Voting has started. One of the things that I do think we get right in D.C., and I know we didn't talk about 83, but I think voter education is really, really important. And when I say voter education, is how you're able to vote. It's who you're voting for, because sometimes we just tell folks, go vote, and that's not enough information. So in D.C., we mail every registered voter a ballot. So folks, if you like me and your bills come to your email box, still check your mailbox and make sure your ballot is in there, because it could have been sitting there for 2 weeks, okay? So you probably already have a ballot. Drop boxes are open. You can vote at a drop box. You can vote at any drop box. You can vote at, when we do open up early voting starting October 28th, you can vote at any voting location in the city. If the place closest to your home is where you want to vote, you can do that, okay? So don't get caught up trying to get home, be in line, and then they cut you off, all this silly stuff. Literally, we make it very easy to vote in DC. And if I'm talking to you now and you're listening to the sound of my voice and you say, Eboni-Rose, I am not registered to vote, so you're not talking to me. I am talking to you because in DC, you actually can register to vote at the polls on election day. You cannot do that now because we've already sent out ballots, but you can show up. Early voting, October 28th through, I believe it is November 3rd, in person. Right. And register to vote. And then on election day, which is the last day to vote, it's not the voting day, it is the last day to vote, because we are voting now, November 5th.
So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, friends and enemies, you heard it here first. These powerful women are doing their part. I'm doing my part. Again, DC Delegate Candidate, DC Statehood Green Party in the general election, first on the ballot. And it's time for you to do your part. It's not just on voting and on election day, but you can also join us at an emergency conference meeting, Crisis in Black Washington, D.C. It's happening for those in the sound of our voice if you get this broadcast in time. That's Saturday, October the 26th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's a town hall meeting at Union Temple Baptist Church, and that is in Anacostia, 1225 W Street, Southeast Washington, D.C. Emergency conference meeting for the Crisis in Black and Brown Washington, D.C., October the 26th, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Won't you do something and join us? It's been Kimon Freeman, Anna Rodriguez, Eboni-Rose Thompson, and from every direction in the universe, north, south, east, west, above, below, and from within, we wish you peace. Do something. Thank you.